Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Noah. Super grateful to be here talking with you guys about the rise of the digital KOL and working with HCPs on social media. Yeah, I love that last presentation. Fantastic job. I really like the point around authenticity, bringing your authentic self to work. So that's why I share all my font-related tirades. You know, that's my authentic self. But anyways, seriously, if you give me enough wine, I will tell you all about Times New Roman and why it's underrated and how cool it was when it was originally designed for the Times in 1932. And the Times was a newspaper, and why it was designed for that was just extreme good legibility at small point sizes. So anyways, very overused now, but people forget why it was so cool in the first place. And with that, completely unrelated, let's get to working with HCPs on social media. So a little bit about me. You heard about the fonts already. But my true passion in the biotech and pharmaceutical space is really creating vibrant and innovative digital communities. Originally, I worked on the agency side, on market research companies across the space on a bunch of different brands, mostly in immunology. And now I'm working at Novocure. We're a medical device company in the oncology space. I work across 2 different brands, one for glioblastoma, which is a type of brain cancer, and then also we just recently launched another brand in non-small cell lung cancer. So I work across both DTC and HCP sides of the spectrum. You know, if you've seen me present before, sometimes I talk about our DTC work at Novocure, but really excited to be talking a little bit about what we've been doing in the HCP spectrum with our digital key opinion leaders. So let's get to it. So really, you know, the rise of digital opinion leaders in the industry came about, you know, through COVID. We found that a lot of HCPs were transitioning what they would typically do you know, at academic conferences, talking with their peers, and we found that that was transitioning to the digital forum. We found that a lot of HCPs took those conversations that they would normally have at conferences and brought them online, specifically to what was previously called Twitter, but now X, and we've seen that continue over the past few years. Like a lot of those conversations went online and they stayed online. And we're really seeing a growth on both X and now actually on LinkedIn. And we're seeing these physicians take all of their conversations onto social media, bringing those dialogues that they would typically have in person, and they're continuing those on social media. Both X and LinkedIn have seen like incredible engagement bumps in physician communities, specifically in oncology. We've seen like on LinkedIn, I actually just met with them in New York, and the data is absurd. Like it's almost an 80 to 90% bump over the past like 2 to 3 years in engagement and active oncologists on the platform. You know, we're seeing a continued emphasis on X, but we're actually seeing a lot of HCPs are viewing, you know, kind of the turmoil that's been going on Twitter or X, and they're now cross-posting on both LinkedIn and Twitter, trying to hedge their bets as to the future of both platforms. And, you know, I really think that this showcases that HCPs value the opinions of their peers above all else. At the end of the day, they're on these platforms to talk with their peers, to learn from their peers, and to be able to, you know, have these great conversations online with their peers. So the question then becomes, you know, we know physicians are active there, we know that conversations are taking place, but like, how do brands actually engage with digital opinion leaders on social media within such a regulated space? Like, what do we do? So the goal by the end of this presentation is that I provide you guys with a few different key points that you can take back to your own respective brands and hopefully, you know, answer this question. So first, I think that DOL identification is huge, and actually figuring out who you want to work with and why is the first piece of the puzzle. I love that social listening was already mentioned today, and I think social listening is extremely underrated for a lot of brands. And this doesn't just apply to identifying digital opinion leaders, this applies for brand monitoring, all that kind of stuff. But planning and identification of those KOLs is super important. So on the screen right now, I know it's a little bit small, but you can actually see this is a live view from a social listening tool that we use at Novocure. This tool is called Talkwalker. There's a bunch of other ones. I know Brandwash was mentioned today. Meltwater is another one. We are using Talkwalker just because Talkwalker was actually recently acquired by Hootsuite, and now you can get both tools and they work together, which is great. So Talkwalker is a really powerful tool. Within Talkwalker, you can really see exactly what's going on when it comes to physician communities. So this is actually a live view on the screen right now of a social listening setup that is for non-small cell lung cancer specifically. So what this will tell me is it will say, here are the physicians that are actively influencing the non-small cell lung cancer space, and it will tell us, okay, these physicians are the most popular, these are the ones that are tweeting the most, here's who they're influencing. And this is super important because instead of just going out into the field and trying to talk with physicians, you can really get an idea of what DOLs are influential within your disease space, which is super important. So, and again, this is just, within my experience, but you can customize this for different disease spaces, you can customize it for different brands. The power of social listening really is unmatched. And this is just within digital opinion leader identification. I mean, there are a lot of other things you can do with this for your brands, monitoring your brands, figuring out how to package something like this up for the sales force is something we're actually working on right now, is how do we get this data? Like if the field team is going out to a specific doctor and we want them to be empowered with knowledge of their physician community, like how can we package something like this up for them? That's what we're working on next. But the application really of this data is endless. So DOL identification is number one before you even start anything. Next, and I know this also was mentioned today, which is fantastic, is this aspect of relationship building with DOLs. And I use a bunch of quotes throughout the presentation. This specifically is an awesome quote. And the quote is, patients are on social media, they trust the content. It's up to us as HCPs, this is an HCP speaking, to provide accurate and engaging information and to combat misinformation. It's time for pharma to step up. Patients and HCPs are here. And I think that really speaks to, the whole theme of this presentation is that HCPs want to engage with brand in some capacity, but it's always a question of what's compliant, what can we do from a regulatory perspective. But HCPs want pharma to step up, and I think the question is, how do we do it in a way that makes sense? So building relationships with DOLs can seem like extremely daunting at first. All right, I want to work with this specific physician on social media, but they have 40,000 followers and we're a small biotech brand, which is kind of what I deal with on a daily basis. Like, how do we even engage with them? And I think, the one thing that we've learned is that not only the large influencers are important, some of those micro and mini influencers can still be really accessible and really important within your specific disease state. So I always emphasize that, while working with some of the larger physician influencers can be important, and it is important, never disregard some of the smaller influential physicians within your disease states. And then I always say that make sure that you work with cross-functional teams, and this again was mentioned today, but it can really get tricky when you have, maybe you already have a relationship with a KOL, with a DKOL, and that relationship is shared with medical. It can be extremely tricky when, we had a medical colleague reach out to the HCP, but now commercial is getting involved. Who was the last one to reach out to them? Are they being bombarded with emails? And then it becomes, all right, well, you've just ruined the entire relationship with this HCP. It's something that I've caught multiple times where I'm like, hey, we need to step back and actually have a strategy here, which I think as industry we have to do a better job of. So I really do stress that, working across multiple teams, being able to develop a strategy to reach out to your HCPs is huge and really important. And then again, I'll always remember, and this is not every physician, but I think a lot of physicians are expecting pharma to engage with them, and we just can do a better job of that. So third is really, this has to do with content. So there are a lot of different ways that you can engage with KOLs, whether it's ad boards, things like that, or sponsored posts. This is more specifically if you were to work with an HCP on something like a sponsored post, or even just HCP content generally. I think that content is really an important piece of this equation. So, something that was also talked about today is, again, this idea of modular AI-driven content. And this is a specific example of a tool that we're utilizing, and I think that other guys in the room, you guys could definitely utilize this, is Adobe Firefly. So in the past, we've really adopted like a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to like custom content. And I think that tools like Adobe Firefly specifically give us the opportunity to really produce like pinpoint accurate, specific, customized content. And this is just a quick screenshot of Adobe Firefly. But what you can do is really develop these like hyper-targeted specific physician creatives, and you can do it all yourself. Like this doesn't require a whole creative agency team to pull off. Like you can do all of this yourself and really create some awesome creative for projects like this that will allow you to get into market quickly and cheaply and provide content to your HCPs if that's something you're doing. So I think Adobe Firefly, really cool tool that may be able to help people in the room develop content on the fly and use something like AI in a practical context. So lastly, here I always say, be prepared for feedback on social media. Like if you're engaging in any type of activity on social media, you always need to be prepared for feedback and comments if you're working with something like a sponsored post or even an ad board. Like DOLs, KOLs, they're going to have opinions based on the projects that you're presenting. And I think it's really important to remain open to that feedback and to developing concepts along with them in order to get the best result. So yeah, definitely pay attention to those comments, pay attention to those feedback points, and be able to deliver them, be able to adjust based on those comments. And then, to round things out here, one of the last points is that organizational support is really important. Again, this was already also mentioned today, but really like this organizational support for DOL strategies is important. And being able to like tie together your legal teams, your regulatory teams, your medical teams, everyone's involved when you're developing a DOL or HCP strategy. You have to be able to deliver that across the organization. It can't be, we're going to operate independently in silos. You have to really work across all of the different parts of the organization in order to deliver something involving DOLs in this way. So, along with this, and I always say this during my presentations, but I'm legal's best friend, if you couldn't tell. So always work with your legal teams, your compliance teams. I have them on speed dial asking about crazy ideas that I have for HCPs. Does this work from a regulatory perspective? Does it work from a legal perspective? Always, work with them directly in order to ensure that you're, staying within boundaries and staying within the guidelines. And also, even get them involved in the creative process. I think that's something that I've really learned over the past few years is, stressing why you're getting legal involved and then getting them involved in the process so that, you can get ahead of any of the issues really quickly. And then lastly, really aligning from the top down that, you want to engage with digital opinion leaders on social media and getting that buy-in from, from the top, from your leadership teams, and that you want to continue working with DOLs on social media now and in the future so that you can really establish those work streams and, be able to have that commitment. So, yeah. And this is a great quote from one of our DOLs actually, and it just speaks to the power of like this strategy and why we feel passionately about it at Novocure. So I'll read this quote out here. One of my patients just told me they fought for Medicare coverage of a therapy in U.S. Congress today, which that's just awesome anyways. What an awesome story to share. This is why HCP engagement on social media is so important. We need to engage more with stories like this. And I think that speaks to why brands need to get involved with DOLs on social media. So thank you so much, everybody. And I will take any questions and again, talk to me during happy hour and I can go on some Times New Roman rants. So there you go.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Noah. Yes, got questions over here. Should have learnt to have been on this side of the room.
Or you can yell out. That works too.
Yeah.
So when you're engaging with them and they're already like active on these, like the LinkedIn and stuff, are you engaging with them as an individual? Like how are you? How's the brand engaging with them? Can you give a little more insight on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really depends on the physician and like if the company has already reached out to them in any capacity. Like with some of our KOL activity in the past, like we've already had an established relationship with medical, for example. So it really comes down to, are you reaching out? If it's a cold reach out, it could be something. I don't think it would be the brand ever reaching out. I think it would be someone from the company reaching out. But typically we have some sort of relationship. It might not be on the commercial side. It might be on the medical side. So I have to send some emails and ask, who has reached out to this physician in the past? What's the relationship like with the physician already? And then how do we kind of modify that moving forward?
So is it more that you establish who you want to represent you guys as the KOL, and then you guys work together on how they represent you guys as a brand? Is that where
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the actual like strategy in place. I mean, again, if it's something like an ad board, it would be a different relationship than something like a sponsored post, depending on what the context is and what's actually happening. So yeah, it depends. No, go for it. Yeah.
So for instance, when you saw that last comment that was like, oh, I had one of my patients went into the metal fought for Medicare. Is that something you would engage with as a comment, like, great job, that's great for sharing, or something like that? Or is that like, what would you do with that information from a company perspective? And a
Yeah,
brand
no,
perspective?
that's a great question. That actually was not like a live social comment. That was just something that we were talking with the HCPs about. Yeah, I think I keep saying it depends, but I guess it would depend like on the specific context, and like if that was something like a live comment, yeah, that might be something we would choose to engage with as a brand. Yeah, and it would depend on like the legal regulatory requirements and guidelines if we would be able to engage with that or not.
So about 4 years ago, I did an ad board with DOLs when I launched a
Awesome.
product. I was all excited about it. It was innovative. It was new back in 4 years ago. And then after I did it, I was excited to kind of push through, execute on some of the tactics that the DOLs in my brand specifically were telling me. Again, here we go again. I got back to the regulatory environment. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
And then I went back and it seemed as though the richness of discussion, and this is purely selfish, it's brand specific. I'm going to be upfront about this. So the richness of the discussion of the DOLs online was always about how they were interacting with one another about a clinical trial, about my product. And that's why regulatory and compliance and whoever else was down my back and up my grill, why they said no. So then it was about going back and look at it, turn the table upside down and look at it from a brand marketing position and saying, well, maybe it's about motivating, without being specific, motivating the DOLs for my brand and let them do the discussion, let them take the conversation without me supporting that. So that's how we did actually employ some of these DOLs and watch that, but they were doing it from their standpoint. I couldn't support it. And so I'm wondering, has that dynamic changed? Now we're 4 years later and,
No, I mean, I think that's a great point. And I think it does depend on the context and like also the specific brand. But what you're speaking to is like that authenticity. And sometimes like it may actually be a better decision for the brand to engage with HCPs in that way, like in more of a peer-to-peer fashion than like a brand directly working with them. I also think that if we're speaking to the evolving nature of social media, like things are changing so rapidly, and especially like comparing the past few years for Twitter specifically, like conversations now are changing rapidly. So there's definitely still a lot of content and conversations around like clinical trial engagement with that kind of thing, but also, and not to get into now I'll become a complete nerd and just talk about social media like algorithms and theories, but because of how Twitter has modified their algorithm now, like there's not just the clinical trial conversations, like political stuff's being brought in. A lot of other conversations are taking place in physicians' feeds that weren't there, say, 3 years ago. So anyways, this is a long way to say is I think you're totally right. I think that for some brands, like maybe you don't need to have brand specific messaging. Maybe it's more just partnering with the KOLs on different content and then letting them talk with their peers. I think that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm curious about fair market value. How do you deal with that? I mean,
Yep, that's totally something we've dealt with. It's something that I worked pretty closely with our compliance team when we first started this. And yeah, as was said previously, actually, there is a fair market value for social media engagement that we were able to determine. And then I worked with my regulatory teams, and they were able to get contracts that made sense for the specific engagement. So yeah, we did originally, and this is what I deal with a lot, is originally it's like, oh, that's a little crazy. How do we figure that out? But eventually, like in that situation, we did determine the fair market value, and we're able to work that out with the regulatory teams. So.
Yeah. Hi, great presentation. So my question, we've tried and failed multiple times over for this exact thing. The hiccup, since you love legal and compliance so much, so hopefully you can give me some guidance. We cannot monitor the influencer's inbox. We can monitor their comments, and there are tools, because it's OpenAI, we can grab that. But we can't do the inbox. So do you have any tips, tricks to help?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are definitely different vendors that can help with this. I mean, the one thing we do from a DTC perspective is that like we have 24/7 monitoring for comments. And I mean, that could be something you dealt with in terms of AE monitoring, like having some way to facilitate monitoring of the inbox could work. I think I mean, that's a tough scenario, and I guess it would depend on like what, for your specific brand, what the regulations would be, and then figuring out how to make it work. But let me kind of chew on that and then get back to you. Yeah. Yeah, totally makes sense. Yep. Yeah. It's tricky. Then it becomes, is there another way we could engage where we wouldn't have to monitor 24 hours, But then, but then it's like, then you lose the whole aspect of, the whole important aspect. Yeah, it's true. And that's when we get into like, that's when we get into how does your legal team interpret that? Because I could see a legal team interpreting that as you're responsible, and then I could see a legal team interpreting that as the HCP's responsible. So again, I feel like I'm giving non-answers, but this is like when I'm talking with Reg, this is what we talk about. Yep. Yeah. And and then for us, it's different too, just because, again, I'm coming from the medical device space, so our regulations are different from, like a black box drug would be. So, yeah. Anyways, the fact that we had a conversation right before happy hour encourages me. But no, I really appreciate all you guys. Thanks for listening.
One last question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my bad.
So, I mean, really thought-provoking. Thank you very much for setting the tone. One of the things that I have observed is the DOL engagement can actually become extremely complementary to KOL ad boards. And in some cases, we've even taken it far enough to become substitutive, right? Replace the KOL ad boards in person events. Have you seen that evolution happen, or you think we're heading in that direction? Just open thoughts from your perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I actually didn't talk about this in the presentation, but one of the first things that we did before we even like engaged with any sort of thought process on digital opinion leaders was have like a DOL ad board, kind of similar to what was brought up previously. You know, and really like having that ability to talk directly with HCPs, I think is super important. And also, yeah, I think that some of those like experiences that a DOL may have in the ad board would like automatically bubble up into their social media because they're hearing that like, okay, hey, this brand, this company is interested in hearing my opinions on social media, and they might even post about it organically afterwards. So I do think the two are complementary, absolutely.
Great. Any final questions, comments for Noah before we wrap up? No. All right, wonderful. Thank you, Noah.
Now, thank you, everybody.